welcome everyone. Thank you for people that are joining us on probably one of the most booked weeks of the year for holidays. And you're probably feeling stretched within your organizations with lots of people out. But thankfully, there are many PhD grade assistants that can help you in your day to day. And that's going to be a big focus of today's session of how you leverage AI, you leverage large language models at all varying stages of the process to just be more effective in your day to day. And this really came about from two places. One, I was at a conference recently, and of a huge room of people, there were only 7 people that had logged into a large language model, not used, not put a prompt in, even logged in. We then put a follow-on prompt out ahead of this session today to ask the audience, how many people are using AI in their day-to-day lives? How many people are using it for work, etc. And I think excluding building action figures with your accessories along the side, about 36% of people were not using it at all. And it goes way over half of the poll when we're talking about people that are barely using the tool. And we've got 3 folks on this call who are using it every single day. I saw a fantastic talk from Tom in Whitstable, which is the home of recruitment and resourcing for those of you who don't know, and the sun is shining here today. And it was really talking about how to practically build it into your teams, build it into your process, and get that enablement running. And obviously, the lovely Vic joins us from Team hackajob, who I spend lots of time with, always talking about all things AI, tech, and product. So an awesome roundup. This is going to be a super interactive session. We're going to be throwing loads of stuff into the chat as we go. If it looks like we're looking away, it's because we're pulling prompts and we're pulling and copying and pasting. It's not because we're not paying attention. But yeah, we'll be jumping around from place to place. But before we do that, maybe just a quick intro as we go around the room. And Vic, why don't we start with you?
Sure. Hi, everyone. So I'm Vic, head of product here at hackajob. And coming from a tech background, I'm really excited to speak to you guys today and share some insights around how we're using AI, how our users are using it in some cases, and also some really interesting tips, tricks, opportunities to kind of help speed up the hiring process for everyone. I know how busy everyone is, so as much as we can make the most of your valuable time, the better.
Nice. Tom, over to you.
Thanks, Sam. Hi, everyone. I'm Tom. I'm a TA lead here for the UK at Microsoft. Been with the business 13, 14 years now, lots of different roles in TA. Currently, my job is to lead the team that manage hiring for our UK go-to-market business, and also senior and director hiring as well. As you say, Sam, AI, huge focus for us here, as you can probably imagine. So hopefully we can share some things today that will be useful for everyone in the day-to-day work.
Yeah, awesome. And we're going to split it into 3 neat sections. So we're going to do crawl, walk, run. And I think this is the most important thing. Like, how can we feel comfortable with just getting going? And so I implore the people that are starting to join right now to log into Copilot, log into ChatGPT, type in Le Chat into Google and log into Mistral. Use whichever large language model you want to start just engaging with stuff. And if you've not logged in before, most of them won't require sign up. You can just drop something straight in. And I think, for starters, maybe do some of the trend which is going on right now, which is some of the action figures. So Vic's going to throw that into the chat. And if people are just doing stuff at the moment, would love to hear from you. But Tom, why don't you talk us through going back through GCSEs whilst people are building action figures and dolls of themselves, and kind of the framework which you've put in place when you think about prompting and building out and using AI effectively.
Yeah, happy to. And we're lucky in the UK in that the prompt framework that we talk about at Microsoft is recognizable for any of us in the UK that have been through the schooling system and done exams, because the prompt framework is very, very easy to remember. It's GCSE. And I'll come on to what that means in a second. But I think for those of you just starting out, it's important to understand that prompting, as much as it may sound like a new skill, something that's a little bit daunting, perhaps something that we have to learn, it is really, at its very, very heart, super basic. It is essentially an instruction that will ask your AI to do something for you. So in our case at Microsoft, we type an instruction into Copilot, ask it to do something. That is what a prompt is all about. So it is as simple as that. It doesn't need to be daunting, but it does help if you have a framework. And that GCSE framework is super, super useful when it comes to kind of starting out with prompts, but also when you get into the more complex ones, it can really help out as well. So let's just go through it quickly. The G stands for goal. What response do you want from Copilot, or yes, other AIs are available? So what response do you want from your AI? The C is context. Why do you need it and who is involved? I'll give you an example of how this all comes together in a second. So we've got goal, we've got context. Next is source. What information should your AI use to go and get this result for you? And finally is the E, expectation. How should your AI respond to meet your expectations? So let me give you a really, really quick example. Let's start with something fairly basic. You need to update yourself on a meeting that's perhaps happened online because you missed it. So if that were me, I'd be into Copilot and I would say, goal, recap this Teams meeting. Simple as that. My context is that I was late to attend and I need a brief overview of the project timeline. Source, did Adele, my team member, propose any changes? So we're telling Copilot, go look for anything that Adele said. And I want this, my expectation is I want the project timeline in a table and any proposed changes from Adele. So actually my prompt becomes, recap this Teams meeting. I was late to attend. I need a brief overview of the timeline. Did Adele propose any changes? Please include the project timeline in a table and highlight changes from Adele. That is it. And that's all I need to put into my AI tool to keep me up to date with a meeting that I missed that may have lasted 30 minutes, 60 minutes, but I can probably catch up in maybe 2.
Yeah, awesome example. And I think that, what's so brilliant about that structure is really it's just the way in which we've been communicating with each other anyway, right? Large language models inherently are built off language that humans have been using. So it's the most familiar way of then prompting, engaging with that content. So great place to start. And I think, for anybody listening now and anybody listening in the future, it's like watching this back on Dave or something when we release it as a podcast later on. But yeah, for anybody watching now or anybody watching in the future, you're all already using AI every single day. That is the reality. Every time you do a search on Bing, every time you do a search on Google, every Spotify recommendation that you're getting, you're leveraging this technology unbeknownst to you. So it's about now focusing in to help on what you do day to day. So we're going to start top of the funnel, market research, and then we're going to work through the funnel and give you some kind of prompts which you can use across the board there. So Tom, I'm coming to you again because we're kind of moving into walk a little bit now.
Yeah, so if we get into you can use this for obviously many things, but we talked about a very simple prompt a second ago. There's many prompts you can do just to set up your day, give me the latest weather information, what's happening in the countries I may be working in, etc. But what the team here at Microsoft have done, and I should stress this has all been done by the team rather than me, is really start to say, well, actually as a recruiter, as a talent acquisition professional, how might I use my AI tool throughout the different stages of the process to help me in my day-to-day, not to make decisions for me, because particularly for us, our philosophy is that every decision will be a human one, but the AI tool can help us get to market, for example, much faster. So the first thing that we thought about, or the team thought about, was this idea of a planning prompt, and I'll pop this into the chat in a minute. And I won't read all of it because it's fairly long, and you can see, to say at the start, Sam, that actually these do take a bit of time. This will take a little bit of learning to get the prompts right. It will take a bit of iteration. When you get them, you can see just how valuable they can be. This one is just imagine you're in that position we've all been in before, where you're about to go and meet said hiring manager for the first time, and you just want to arm yourself with as much information as possible to show up in the best way in that meeting and to make the most of that maybe 25, 30 minutes you've got with that manager. So we're going to ask the AI to do a few different things for us because we want to make sure that we are fully prepped. We're going to ask it based on the job description that we have, and depending on the different tool you have and the different license you have, there are varying levels of ability for it to read those tools. We're going to get as much resource as we can out of that job description. So we're going to ask it to review the job description and all the other relevant information it has of the particular job and the company it's for. And we're going to ask it to provide a 150-word summary of that job to bring it to life. We're going to ask it for the core requirements of that job and what would make someone successful in that role, in our case, Microsoft, but in your case, any company that you work for as well. On top of that, I want the 5 top skills that job description calls out. I want that in separate paragraphs. And I want you to also give me the unique selling points of that role. Because I really want to use that with any potential candidate that I'm going to go and screen. I want to go and use that with a manager just to make sure we're aligned on what we're looking for. What's really important with these prompts is that we're calling out how we want it. Remember that E, that expectation at the end. So I want the top 5 skills, but I want them in bullet points and I want them easy to read. So that, just from a job description perspective, is really going to help us understand what the job is. But we're not going to stop there, Sam, because we've been working on this for a while now. We're also going to ask the AI, while you're doing that, I want you to outline me a typical day in the life of someone that does this job at that company. And the AI is either going to have access to your company information and therefore be able to do that, or it's going to look externally into the web and understand what it might be like to work in your company. And while you're doing that, I want you to tell me, in the country that I'm hiring for, how hard is it to hire for this role? What is something like a diverse representation like? If there are any location hotspots, tell me where this talent is. Any data or statistics that you find relevant, tell me. I also want to know the top 10 companies that employ this type of person. I want that information in a table. I want it in a table form with different columns that tell me why you've chosen those companies. And I also want you to give me 5 questions that I could ask a hiring manager to determine if my understanding of this role is right. And then maybe 5 or 10 questions that I could ask a candidate as well when I'm briefing. That sounds like a huge amount. And what's important to remember is, if you're not doing a prompt like this at the moment, think about what that process looks like for you. You've got to read the job, you've got to kind of unpick it, and we all know they're not normally that good. And then you've got to individually go and do all the different tasks I've talked about. The AI tool, if you use this prompt, will do all of that for you in about 2 or 3 minutes. You saw the video of it in play, shall we say, live in Whitstable. And I think we can all agree it saves hours and hours of time for a recruiter who's keen just to make sure they show up in the right way. So I'm going to put that in there now.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that, like, on the depth point, one, it's iterative process, but 2, once you've done it once, every time you're then coming up for the next role, it's a case of changing the title and changing the setup slightly, and then you're in a really wonderful position. So yeah, I'd implore anybody that's coming up for a meeting like that internally right now to just take this one that's already pre-built and ready for you, and go and leverage it in your internal systems. So yeah, great example there. I suppose wait for that one to land, because I'd love to know if somebody's ready to connect with it, because you know, it's important to see the size and the scale. The other piece of advice here would definitely be to ask the system that you're using to improve the prompt for you. Ask it to help build it out and make it more relevant. So yeah, really lovely length and depth there on that one. Okay, so let's talk about. Oh, go on.
So I put it in there, Sam. Apparently, it exceeds the limit of my comments. I've split it into 2, but you can put it in all as once, I promise.
Yeah, nice.
I was going to add a bit on that, Sam, actually, as well, just to kind of come back to. I think those prompts are so amazing, and it's so interesting to see how, with the access to the data that you have, and how Tom and the Microsoft team have set up their Copilot setup, that they can do that, and then also kind of want to come back to the fact that, you know, you can also start really small. So sometimes just want to reiterate that some of those longer prompts can maybe feel a bit intimidating to try off the bat straight away. And actually there's some really interesting ways using the GCSE framework. So for example, we have one that I can share in the chat that takes a job description and creates a Boolean search that you can then put into LinkedIn Recruiter, for example. So kind of building up to the prompts, that kind of longer prompt that Tom shared, taking small parts of what is repetitive that you do every single day and integrating that into your current tools and workflow can be really powerful and save you quite a lot of time.
Yeah. And I think on that point, it's almost follow the process of starting small, build through that. And because the reality is, what we're sharing here is not taking anything outside of publicly available data, and it's just doing the work that you would be doing anyway and packaging that up. And it's a case of then taking the response and thinking, I'm 60% of the way there, 70% of the way there, I'm going to add these bits. And can you feed that back into the system? Can you then say, hey, actually, on reflection, these are the things which I need to focus on? And it's going to be able to pick up, and it'll be able to learn with that. It's like partnering. Someone put it really well. Johnny Campbell put it really well the other week. It's like having a fully fledged PhD student that's looking to impress you in every single subject 24 hours a day. So how can you play it back in that setup? And then I think where some of the hesitance has come from, and you know, the poll kind of spoke to that as well, as like, I wouldn't dream of it. Our organization is really averse to this. And a lot of that is around decision making. A lot of that is around access to data, etc. So Vic, I'm going to come to you now. You know, the way in which we think about things at hackajob, and then, you know, just your views more broadly in terms of getting things for that run stage where you're bringing in a lot more data to make much more considered choices.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think a lot of that kind of sentiment or nervousness comes from, still kind of feels like quite an unknown to people. And you see that from when we survey decision makers across the companies we work with over the last 2 years, the number of decision makers who feel much more comfortable with AI and are much more interested in how AI can drive efficiency through their businesses is increasing, which is really, really exciting to see. And I think that will take some time to kind of filter all the way down throughout all levels of the organization. But that's where, it's really exciting to use, tools like ourselves. We really invest time and money into like our SOC 2 and ISO compliance, and being very recruitment specific, we're able to design safeguards and use our LLMs and algorithms to create a really great experience for users on both sides of the marketplace, but whilst respecting compliance, data privacy, and all of those rules. But we can kind of take that burden for companies, and companies similar to ours would do like similar things. And then what's also interesting is we have a design principle around keeping humans in the loop. So we know the decisions that we want humans to be making in terms of like final decisions on progressing candidates, for example, but we're still able to leverage the real power in AI tools, for example, like summarizing a job description into a summary, summarizing a candidate profile into the highlights and the key strengths that they have and how well they fit a role, so that it speeds up that process for recruiters, allowing recruiters to spend the time doing the things that they love to do, speaking to candidates, helping strategize on that whole recruitment strategy, and less about kind of trying to just manage their time more effectively.
And the lift to go from walk to run there is really, really crucial. I think just to double click on it, it's like actually building an integrated process where you're starting to build out longer prompts, you're starting to enable the team is like a really fantastic next step after you've started to experiment. But then actually you're going to be looking at tools, either hackajob, Copilot, wherever it is, that have got such large amounts of data that they're able to level up the context that you're able to provide. They're able to give far more detail and context, and all of the examples on hackajob is all around technical skills that people can't be possibly up to date with all of the frameworks, all of the programming language, everything. You can't possibly be up to date with all the context across everything in your CRM as you would do with a kind of Copilot setup. So in fact, it makes it more balanced and enables humans to be more considered, as if you had 5, 6, 7, 50 times the amount of time that you normally would have to research every single area before you start a role. It's just not feasible. So yeah, definitely on that part. And then I think, Tom, would love to come to you in terms of the way I think Copilot is very deliberately named. So I kind of see where it's going, like how you think about it on your side in terms of that integration more into the workflow more broadly.
I think one of the things that we first looked at was the different stages of a hiring process. And of course, there's many, but fundamentally, if you boil it down, you've got planning, sourcing, assessing, and hiring. And you can argue there's ones in between, of course, but if you really break it down, there's those 4 stages. So we looked at opportunities of where in those processes can AI give us the most benefit earliest. And for us, that's probably in the earlier stages. Where can we remove some of that heavy drudgery that will enable our recruiters to do what they do best, to Vic's point, and get out to market quicker? How do we get them doing what they do, which is going to connect with people, understand who they are, understand their skills, capability, and then decide if they're right for our business or maybe not. But actually, we found that by targeting that area, we're able to free people up by putting Copilot to play in terms of going to market research, going to summarize job descriptions, summarize sometimes phone calls with managers or with candidates. You take away hours and hours and hours of non-recruiting work, if you want to call it that. Now, I know that's slightly controversial to call it non-recruiting, but really, if you take away that, you're allowing your teams and yourself to really focus on what you're there to do, which is find the best person for the job for your company. So we really focused in on those earlier stages for now. I talked about planning earlier. We have a very similar prompt that we use in terms of creating Boolean that Vic shared, which I love. We've added to that, which is while you're doing that, write me a 150-word LinkedIn post.
Let's do it. Throw that one in as well, Tom, in the next gap.
I'll put it in a second. Depending on the license you have, and obviously I come at this from a point of privilege. The company I work for makes Copilot, which means I have full access to everything it can do, and I fully appreciate not everyone has that. But if you have got a Copilot and it talks to your office suite, for example, and it talks to Teams, you can very quickly say, remember that call I had with Sam last week and that call I had with Vic the week after? Please summarize what we talked about and tell me what my actions were. And then instantly, you haven't got to go back across those notes, you haven't watched recordings, all of that kind of stuff saves you time, and you can use that time to then get out into market. So the more you can take away at the front, that kind of drudgery, that admin stuff, that allows that Copilot will do for you. And yes, your point is a very good one, Sam. It's a Copilot, not a pilot. So you should always check it. And you should always make sure that what you're reading and what it's giving you is correct. It's your responsibility to do that, as anyone using AI will tell you. But once you've got the as you said, the prompts set up, once you're checking it, once you aim it at the right phase of the process, you really do free your teams up to do their best work.
Yeah, and it's not too dissimilar for when, the big web came to us, right? And we were all searching for things, and it's like, do you trust this source? There's got to be an element of critical thinking there where, is this right? Is this going to be reflective of the scenario? And you are the experts within your organization to do it. And actually, it could enhance some of the research setup in that if it's taking you 60% of the way there, well, you can go a little bit deeper than you normally would have done in that scenario. It doesn't mean you need to take that, shave some pieces off and then move on to the next piece. And in fact, continue with the prompt. You'll find that tools are becoming increasingly more powerful now. And if you're doing simple prompts, it's then suggesting a bunch of actions that it could take for you on your behalf. And everybody's got access to that at a free level now. It's not too much of a stretch. And then it's how can you get to that enterprise grade playback quickly? And there's plenty of tools out there that are like hackajob, SOC 2 compliant. They've got all of the paperwork behind them to ensure that the data that you're putting in is safe and the output that you're getting out is fair. So go and trial, go and have those conversations. Use the interviewing tools. I think the interviewing tools is one of the most fascinating use cases at the moment of ingesting all of that context from the hiring manager briefing, from the candidate briefing, and then being able to play back that data. But let's just take one step back, because I think it's really important that we've highlighted the kind of place where people probably need to get to stay competitive, which is being able to ingest lots of internal data, lots of external data, and come back with something really meaningful. And Tom, I'm going to flip back to you here on like how you build that team adoption, because we've got a bunch of shared prompts internally for loads of different tasks, and adoption is mixed. And when I've spoken to businesses, adoption's been really mixed. But yeah, from our conversation before, you guys have got a pretty well run setup there to kind of get people used to this.
Yeah, we talked about this before. I think it's all about community. It's all about community, and it's all about building that sense of learning, that sense of fun, that sense of vulnerability together. We went through a process to identify a team of super users. So we have an AI activation super user team. The people in that team are absolutely fabulous. They have a huge passion for the topic. They were already early adopters of using AI technology and using Copilot when it landed for our teams a couple of years ago. So they were the perfect people, and we picked people from different teams in our EMEA organization so that we had representation everywhere. They came together and kind of built a bit of a mission, which was to increase our adoption of the tool itself, and also alongside that, increase our capability when using the tool. So quite simply, they wanted to get people to open Copilot every day. Like, that's a challenge in itself, is to break that habit of not using it, almost unlearn the way that you've done things in the past, and also enable people to find the value to them. It's different for everyone. How I use it will be different how you use it, Vic, and how you use it, Sam. And then really importantly, to encourage people to share what they were learning. The good, the bad, and the ugly, right? And we've had great fun looking at the disastrous prompts that people have used and some of the outcomes, just as much as we've learned loads from the really, really good ones. So we built that team, and they did some really, really cool stuff. They, as I said before, identified the opportunity of where we thought we could use this best, where would recruiters really buy into it early, and that's taking away that drudgery that no one really loves doing. They operate things like focus groups, workshops at really small scale with just a handful of people each to understand actually what people really felt about using AI. There's obviously, we work for a big tech company. You're supposed to tell everyone that you love it and you're using it every day. And it's important to actually understand, are you struggling with something, or is there something putting you off? What's the real world sentiment's important? And we did a lot of learning. So we spent hours and hours and hours putting together calls and sharing calls so that teams could learn from each other, and started to build kind of prompt of the week challenges. And we built a bit of a scoreboard across different teams, because who doesn't love a competition if you work in talent acquisition, right? And we continued to test that sentiment. Was it working? Were we seeing people adopt the tool more? Were we seeing them use it for more complex things, all things we can track alongside that kind of just anecdotal sentiment as well. But I think the biggest thing was that creation of a community that really encouraged fun, really encouraged experimentation, and ultimately what it led to was people coming up with new prompts and sharing them across the team. And then the champs would go, okay, that's a great idea for a prompt, but perhaps it isn't crafted perfectly. let's take that away and work on it and come up with maybe one or two of the things that I've shared today as well. And what that's resulted in is a prompt gold mine, which the team have created. We have a whole library of really fantastic prompts that are all saved. You can literally just click them and it will, like the planning one that I shared earlier and the Boolean one, and all our team can use that instantly without having to worry about creating anything new. So that community element was really, really key. The fun element was really, really key, but also then the output and storing it somewhere where everyone has access to it and everyone can see the benefit of it has really, really helped as well.
Yeah, and we'll be mining at that gold vein after this and sharing it out with everybody. We've also built some stuff internally on our side, very tech specific, just to get people started. And I think the other thing I'd say is if you're not feeling confident about doing stuff which is company related at the moment, start off with your own personal workflow. It might just be building a formula in Excel. That was one of my first use cases, and it just up leveled my abilities instantly overnight. There's still, some domain experts internally that would trump me every day, but enabled me to level up there. It might be something in your personal life of like asking for a refund for something or a challenge or looking for a mortgage document. It could be anything along those lines. Just start putting things in, see the power. By the time you start doing that, you're going to be moving in the right direction. So we'll share a ton of stuff afterwards. There is a question from Ivan. Ivan, it's been many years, buddy. Glad to see your name pop up. Would you be able to use a similar approach to search your existing talent pool? Now, this is a hot topic.
Yeah, you can, of course. So we use the tool to create search strings for us within our ATS. That's absolutely a Boolean string, I should say, within our ATS. So that's one way we do it. You can, of course, buy tools that will do that for you. They'll surface their own talent based on the job description that you put in. It all depends on the philosophy of the organization and how they want to use AI, what's their position on how far they want to take AI in a decision-making process, and also the tools that you have available to you and how you want to utilize them. So yes, you can, but it depends on the company's position and also what tools you have available.
Yeah. And Vic, not too dissimilar to searching into a marketplace there. So even though Ivan's called out Tom specifically, I'd love to get your views on how you think about it.
Yeah, definitely. Again, it kind of depends on where you think that those great candidates are going to be and your decision on where you want to search for them. I think the candidate experience is something to always bear in mind when you're kind of looking at candidates that maybe were interested in your company a few years ago and it's been a while. But yeah, definitely. I think what's really interesting about how AI and large language models work is that it very much works on the data that's available to it. But the prompts, provided the data is there, typically work across a lot of these different scenarios. And then, like Tom was talking about earlier, just having that critical thinking and checking the outputs that you're getting, because sometimes, for example, searching for talent within an existing talent pool that maybe their data isn't quite as up to date, or, their data is in a slightly different format than maybe what you're used to, might mean you get slightly different results. But with that kind of the ability to kind of have those fast feedback loops means you can spot those quite quickly and tweak your prompts as needed.
Awesome. And I think, just across the board, and we're kind of coming to time now, and it was always going to be a short and impactful session. Just a few things then, just to recap. I think important as we go through, when you're in that kind of initial stage, just put anything in. It can be anything connected to your life. It can be anything connected to the role. Start with things that are publicly available. I think the research prompt is the perfect example of that. And just steal the one from here. It gets you off to a fast start for a really detailed outcome and output. Then when you're looking at that kind of walk stage, it's about how can you build that internal community? How can you leverage, your team and combined mind to bring something together that's a lot more structured and focused, and you can take the learnings from, and it's about that internal enablement. And then the final stage, and this is just happening regardless, you are going to have your internal systems connected to AI. You're already starting to see it within your Gmail, within your Outlook. You're going to be starting to see it across your platform regardless. And then it's about how can you get that inference from your internal systems, or when you're working with external providers. Another one I'd call out as well is Poetry. If you've not checked them out for recruiter enablement, they've got huge libraries of prompts across every area of recruitment. And then, other kind of enterprise supporting solutions that can just plug straight in, that have tons more data than you have. I think that's the next wave when you look across the big Magic 7 tech, when you look across Oracle, when you look across Salesforce, orgs that have just significant volumes of data that sit outside of your org, inside of your org, and beyond, that can then create that inference and build something that's really powerful, ongoing, repeatable. And again, I just implore everyone to start to engage with stuff and don't be scared of doing it, which is surprising, the volume of people that have not yet engaged, and it's not hard to do. Any closing thoughts on top of that, Tom?
I'll build on what you said, Sam. I think this isn't something that's coming. This is something that's here, and this is something that's being used, that has been being used for a while. So if you're not already taking the first step, whatever that looks like for you, it's something I would implore you to do, however big or however small. And then as you build it out across your organisation, whether there's a few of you or a lot of you, that community side of it is really, really important. I think there is a hesitance at the moment because everyone thinks they're the only person who doesn't quite know how to use it, and they might not want to admit that. I'll bet you probably a lot of the money that I have that everyone is feeling a little bit like that with AI at the moment. So find a buddy, find a team, find as many people as you can, and start sharing what you're doing, asking what they're doing. Share the successes, share the learnings, and you'll find you educate yourself pretty quickly.
Nice. And then to triple click, Vic, and that rhymed as well.
Yeah.
Anything you would add, closing thoughts?
I don't think I can summarize it much better apart from, be super curious about it. And I think the fun part is a really key element. Like, have fun in seeing what you get, try a few things. We kind of say, like, have a go, have a play, and see what happens.
Yeah, wonderful. And we're going to share a goldmine of different prompts. Obviously, we threw a few into the comments today, but there's a bunch of them that we're going to share afterwards. So there's a button that says that we can email you afterwards with this information. Click that if you want to receive it. Thanks, everyone, for joining us this Easter. That is the end of the show.
Cheers all.